Brilliant. I think I am now recording. Right. So welcome everybody. This is a whistle stop tour. We realise we've still got the presentation limit on our Zoom meeting, so it will sort of be a 40-minute session where we will just do an overview of everything to do with the SATs taking place this year from Tuesday the 9th of May until Friday the 12th of May. Myself and Mr. GB will be sharing it between us, and we'll be going over everything. If as you're going through, if you have any questions, please pop them into the chat. If we get a chance at the end, we will go through and we will answer them as you're here. If we don't get a chance to answer it before the meeting times out, then what we will do is we will answer those questions on Class Dojo. So we will put a recording of this session up for you so you can watch it again if you want, and we will make sure that we'll answer any questions that you give us. So please pop them in the chat, and hopefully we'll get a chance in this session to answer them. Otherwise, they will be answered on Class Dojo. As you can see, the SATs this year are taking place Tuesday 9th of May to Friday the 12th of May. It's normally a Monday to Thursday, and it's been shifted because of the coronation weekend. So we've got that extra bank holiday on the Monday, which means that all of those days have shifted slightly just for this year. This session, we will do a quick overview of the Year 6 SATs. They are statutory assessments, so they are part of one of our kind of statutory tests that we have to do. They all schools do them, and all schools will follow this same timetable. So we will share with you what tests we'll be doing on what days, what those tests look like, and when you will find out the results and all sorts of other things like that. And also, importantly, how we will support your children through the SATs. I'm speaking as somebody that prior to being a school leader, I was a Year 6 teacher for about 12 or 13 years. So I'm very experienced in both delivering SATs and supporting children through it, as is Mr. Godbert Brown. So how we support them, and also anything that you can do to help support your children through the process as well. As you can see here, this just gives you an overview of the assessment that actually takes place across that school career and where the Year 6 SATs sit as part of it. And you can see they're part of a raft of statutory assessments, starting from that foundation stage profile and those baseline tests in reception, the phonics screening in Year 1, the Year 2 SATs, which will become non-statutory from next year, the multiplication tables check, which became statutory a few years ago in Year 4, and building up to the Key Stage 2 SATs. And one thing I always do like to point out is that they are Key Stage 2 SATs. Although they sit them in Year 6, they're not a test of what the children have just learnt in Year 6. They are part of an assessment that really looks at what they have learnt since the last assessments in Year 2. And amazingly, this Year 6 was the last group before SATs that did the SATs. So they are one of the few ones in Key Stage 2 that actually did the assessments back in Year 2. And we'll have that progress, and we'll be able to monitor and look at their progress from Year 2 up to Year 6. There was a previous level system that the government abolished in 2014, and so from 2016 we've been doing sort of newer style SATs. There was a new curriculum which was more challenging, and that then became reflected in the tests. So they have been doing SATs for quite some time, but we certainly in 2016 saw the grammar and punctuation test included in it for the first time. They took writing tests out of it, and we saw a more challenging curriculum reflected in these tests. So children are expected by the end of Year 6 to meet a set of targets for their age group, which we call age-related expectations. So what we say is, instead of hitting a level, so if you've got children, older children who might have been expected to get to certain levels by the end of year 6, level 4, or level 5, or even level 6. Now we expect children, and the government expect children, to meet the age-related expectations for year 6. And we will go over very shortly. Mr. Gobert Brown will talk through what those age-related expectations are for reading, for writing, and for maths. Over to you, Mr. GB.
Thanks. Yeah, so I'm just going to go quickly through what working at the expected standard looks like. They can be assessed as working towards the expected standard, working at the expected standard, or working at greater depth, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But here is for reading. This is what the expected standard looks like. So it's the pupil can read age-appropriate books with fluency, reading aloud with intonation, work out the meaning of words from context. That comes up in the reading paper quite often. There'll be a sentence with an unfamiliar word and they need to read around it and from the context of the sentence understand what that word might mean. Discuss understanding of what they've read, inferences, predictions, retrieving information from non-fiction, summarizing main ideas, evaluate how authors use language, including figurative language, and making comparisons within and across books. So these are all skills that they've been building up to throughout their journey in primary school. And so in the reading paper, this is what they're tested on to be working at the expected standard. And so that's for reading. And next I'm going to show you writing. So for the expected standard for writing, they need that, and there isn't a SATs paper for writing. We'll talk a bit more about how that's assessed in a little bit, but working at the expected standard for writing, they need to be able to show that they can write for a range of purposes and audiences and select that language appropriately with an awareness of what they're writing for and who the reader is. In narratives, they are doing setting and character descriptions, integrating dialogue in narratives, selecting appropriate vocabulary and showing that wide range of vocabulary that they've been learning throughout their journey in school, using a range of devices to build cohesion within their paragraphs, using their verb tenses consistently and correctly, using a wide range of punctuation, showing their spelling skills, and maintaining legibility in joined handwriting when writing at speed. So they do look for joined handwriting, and I've spoken to the class about this, and it doesn't have to be every single piece of work, but they do need to show and prove that they are able to join their handwriting legibly on a few of their pieces of work. So the children who don't join as much, I've had this discussion with them, so we're making sure that we are showing that and we're getting that evidence basically for them. So that's writing, and I'm just briefly going to show you what greater depth standard looks like in writing as well. So this is where the pupil can, so a lot of it is similar, but it's just taken up a level. So we've got writing effectively for a range of purposes and audiences, drawing independently on what they've read as models for their own writing. So the more reading the children do independently, and the more they can draw from that, really contributes to their ability to get greater depth. Distinguish between the language of speech and writing and choose the appropriate register and tone. Exercise an assured and conscious control over the levels of formality. And so they may be switching between levels of formality appropriately within their writing, and using a wide range of punctuation taught at Key Stage 2 correctly, such as semicolons, dashes, colons, hyphens, and showing that wide range that they're able to use, and using that punctuation precisely to enhance their meaning and avoid ambiguity. And then maths as well, for the age-related expectations, I will just read through these top bits. So the place value, large numbers and decimals, mental calculations, including using efficient strategies, using formal methods to solve multi-step problems, recognizing the relationship between fractions, decimals, and percentages, and expressing them as equivalent quantities. All of these sections we have been through our maths mastery program all the way through Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. They've been building up on all of these different sections as they go throughout the years. And then also they are able to use fractions, decimals, and percentages, relating between the three, substituting values into a simple formula. So using algebra, the basic algebra we've been learning in year 6, such as to use that to find the perimeter or area of different shapes, calculating with measures, and using mathematical reasoning to find missing angles. And so all those are the things that children need to do to get age-related to achieve that in the Key Stage 2 SATs.
Okay, so in terms of the subjects that are assessed through the SATs, it is English, maths, and there will, when you get the results back, and you will have a results sheet, and I'll talk through that slightly later, there will also be a mark for science. So English, maths and science. But in terms of the actual tests, it's English and maths during SATs week. So the within English, there is grammar, punctuation and spelling. So there is a separate test for grammar, punctuation and spelling. Again, we'll go through those shortly. There is a reading test, which is a comprehension test, and the children are assessed in writing. Now, years and years ago, there used to be a writing test where they would do a timed test under timed conditions. That hasn't existed now for a long time. It's quite rightly, we assess children's writing on the work that they do day in and day out and in their books. So it's internally assessed. There's lots of stringent moderation and local authority moderation going on, but we make our judgments on the actual writing, and the judgments are made right up until the end of May. So when children sort of think, oh, that's everything done at the end of SATs week, actually we're still looking at writing, and we're still working on and judging their writing right up until sort of May half term is the deadline for that. So grammar, punctuation and spelling and reading are those main tests during SATs week for English. In maths, we have 3 different papers, and again I'll talk shortly about when those take place. There is an arithmetic paper which replaces the old mental maths test. There used to be a mental maths test which I was about to age myself with saying it was on a cassette when I first started teaching. They went on to a CD where somebody would read out questions and children would write the answers under time conditions. That's gone, but there is an arithmetic test that replaces that. And then there are 2 papers which are kind of parallel papers for reasoning, which is sort of problem solving linked to lots of different areas of maths, and we'll show you some examples of those shortly. In science, there is no formal test, and it's the grade for science is done through teacher assessment. So as they go through their science units through the year, we assess and we use our ongoing assessment. We use our knowledge of what the children are doing and observations of things like investigations and classwork to give a teacher assessment on science. For more able learners, it is all inbuilt into the test. So there used to be years ago a separate test for children, and we could sort of the sort of more gifted and talented children we could put forward for an additional test. Now what they've done is they incorporate it into the main papers. So all children will take the same tests, but the level of difficulty will range hugely. So the papers are deliberately designed to cover all levels that the children are working at, from children working sort of at year 3 level, because it's Key Stage 2 tests, right up to children working almost beyond Key Stage 2 level. So there is a real kind of stretch and challenge. We always try and tell the children to not be too hard. There's an inbuilt, I think, desire to want to always finish the paper and answer every question. But actually, particularly in the maths and the grammar papers, some of those questions at the end are deliberately designed to stretch those more able pupils and will be really quite challenging. So that's all inbuilt as part of it. Similarly, the government try and encourage all children, if they can, to access the tests. If we feel that there are any children working significantly below year 3 level, then we can disapply them from the tests. And certainly that's a judgment that we will make, and they would be quite they would be conversations that we would have, but that would be a really exceptional instance. What we do is that where possible, all children will sit the tests, and we put what we call access arrangements in place to support children. So those children that we know have, say, a diagnosis of dyslexia or struggle with reading speed or have other needs, we can apply for additional time for those children. We can also do things like incorporate rest breaks for the children. If there are children that struggle with the speed of writing, that they can have scribes. So lots and lots of things that we put in place. And myself and Mr. Gobbert Brown and Mr. Hubbard, we sit down, we look at all of the children and we think how best, because it's about us creating an environment where the children can perform to their maximum potential, and they're not disadvantaged by sort of, you know, any sort of inability to be able to focus or concentrate. So we put lots of things in place. We have lots of targeted adult support, and we can do things like, say, rest breaks. We give them snacks, we give them drinks, so they're really well supported. You actually find that children, I think every year we've ever done it, will come away at the end of SATS week and say that was their favourite week that they've ever had in school. They seem to absolutely love it. I think being treated and nurtured and being treated in a really special way for the week, they seem to love. But the children really get a buzz from it, and they're very well cared for and looked after during that week. But if you do have any children, any of your children got sort of specific SEND that you do want to speak to us about, please come and chat to myself, to Mr. Gobbert Brown about it. I'm sure we're very aware of it, and we've already got things in place. But if you want that reassurance, we're more than happy to talk you through it. This is the timetable. So this is the national timetable for the SATs. So every year 6 in the country will be doing the same tests on the same days. So Tuesday is grammar, punctuation and spelling. So we have paper 1, which is short answer questions, and there's about 50 questions that are asked there, and they are we'll give you some examples of that slightly later. And then paper 2, which is a spelling paper, and again we'll show you some examples of that as well. Wednesday is when children do their reading paper, which is a comprehension test. Thursday they do the first 2 of the maths papers, so the arithmetic test, and then they have a short break, and then they do the reasoning paper, first of the problem solving papers. And then on Friday we finish with the 3rd of the papers, so it's quite a short day on Friday, the last one, and we'll be done sort of well before lunchtime on that day. So everybody follows that same schedule. In order for us to be able to best support the children, we do sort of 2 sittings. So we'll have one group that go first and will do their test, while the others do some revision sessions, and then they will swap over to the other group there. But we tend to manage to do all of the tests. Even last year, where we had 60 children in year 6, we got everything done by lunchtime. So predominantly in the mornings on the Tuesday, the Wednesday, the Thursday and the Friday. Sorry, this is you, Mr. GB. So I was taking over.
Well, yeah, I'm going to start talking to you now about what the assessments look like, and we'll show you some examples. But just to start off, the writing assessment is teacher assessed and is based on a mixture of writing assessments and independent tasks that have been taken throughout the year. So their beautiful topic books are used as the source for their writing assessment. They will be assessed against the age-related criteria and will be assessed as either working below Key Stage 2, working towards the expected standard, working at the expected standard, which is those ones I talked through earlier, and working at greater depth within the expected standard. So that's writing assessment. But we're going to move on to reading now, and I'll show you some examples of what comes up on the papers themselves. So could I have the next slide? Thank you. So on the English reading paper, there is a single paper with questions based on 3 passages of text. They're mostly fiction, but sometimes there are non-fiction sections that come up. There could be poetry. There's 1 hour, including reading time, to complete the test. Children are encouraged to work text by text, reading the text and answering the questions before moving on. They keep the booklet on the desks with them. Each child has their own individual booklet. And they should be referred to when they're answering questions. We've done lots and lots of practice of this, making sure that children keep referring back to it. The English reading test is really can be helpful, that all the answers are in the paper for them. So it's just making sure that they really focused on reading through it and rereading and checking and making sure that they're drawing on that throughout the whole test. So the selection of question types in the English reading paper, they include ranking and ordering, such as number the events below to show the order in which they happen in the story, labeling, label the text to show the title, find and copy one word. These ones are really important that they get their spelling correctly if they're copying something. I've been through this a lot with them. Short constructed responses, such as responses to questions, open-ended responses. These ones may gain them more marks. They could be up to 3 marks for such as this: look at the sentence that begins once upon a time. So they have to find that first in the text and then answer the question based on that. Explain fully, referring to the text in your answer. So these questions, they can get more than 1 mark as long as they make their point and refer to where they got that from in the text. So here's the English reading paper. An example of the types of questions that children will be asked to remember. There are 1, 2, or 3 marks available for each question. So I'm going to show you an example from the 2019 reading paper now. This is what it looks like. There's these 3 texts are the ones that came up. They're around 1 to 2 pages each. And so as you can see here, we've got an example of a fiction text. There's a fact sheet about bumblebees. And so many different types of text that they have to refer to. And then the questions that come along with that on the next slide, we'll just show you some examples that we've got. So
it is, sorry, Mr. GB, it's worth saying that the texts are deliberately designed so they're slightly rising complexities they go through. So
yes,
the first one tends to be slightly easier, so it's designed around a slightly lower reading age. The middle text is sort of the next sort of more complex, and then the third one. So they're all about the same length, but the text is slightly more challenging to read with vocabulary and so on, and the questions are slightly more complex. So it does slightly get sort of, there are easier and harder questions within each of the texts. So we say, if you find one really hard in text 2, don't say there's no point in me doing text 3, because there are then easier questions on text 3.
Yeah, the beginning of each of the sections of questions do start off nice, and they do get progressively trickier. You can see some of the examples here. So on that top left, all they would need to do to get the mark in that is tick one of the answers. But then down in the bottom right, they're asked to get communicate their impressions of a relationship between 2 of the characters. And it says, give 2 impressions supporting your answer with evidence from the text. So there's a lot that they need to do in those. So that there's a wide range. And we've also got like in the bottom left there, some tick box questions. So they're not all about writing out your answers and providing that evidence, but they do progressively get trickier as they go through the paper.
And we do talk to the children a lot about reading those questions carefully, where it says give 2 ways that they are important, or tick 1, and making sure that they read that bit of detail, and they can circle and underline things on the paper if they need to help them to focus in on those things.
I think that's me. I think it's grammar and punctuation.
So, grammar, punctuation, and spelling. The test covers sentence grammar, punctuation, vocabulary, and spelling. The handwriting is sort of included in the writing assessment, but of course, there is a real emphasis on children clearly writing out the answers, because if any word in an answer is spelt incorrectly, the answer will be wrong. So making sure that their writing is really clear is really important with this test. As I said earlier, there's 2 papers. The first is the short answer questions, 45 minutes long, and it's about 48, 49, 50 questions, and they're all multiple choice or short answer questions. There's a lot of questions to get through, roughly 1 a minute. So children, again, very much encouraged with all of these things. If there is a question they can't do, don't sit and worry about it for 10 minutes. Move on, come back to it at the end if needed. It's only 1 mark. There's only a couple of them in there at the worth 2 marks. Paper 2 is a spelling paper, which is 20 sentences with one word missing. And the teacher, either myself, Mr. Godbert Brown, or the teacher that's in the room administering it, will read out sentences with a word missing, and the children will spell the missing word. And I'll show you an example of that shortly. It's not a timed test, but it does last about 15 to 20 minutes. And we repeat the word about 3 times, just to make sure that the children have all heard the word correctly and all had a go at spelling it as best as they can. So in terms of the grammar, punctuation and spelling, there are a whole raft of things that children are expected to know linked to that programme of study. And these are the things, it's quite complex, actually. I when they first introduced this in 2016, I think all of us Year 6 teachers had a little panic, because I'd done an English degree and I hadn't learned half of the things that we were asking those Year 6 children to do. So there's certain things that they just need to know. So things like grammatical terms and word classes. So what is a noun, a verb, a conjunction, and so on and so on. And an adverb, a pronoun. They need to know the different types of sentences. So what a command sentence is, a question sentence, a statement is, and how we would identify those. They need to know how sentences are constructed and joined, so clauses, phrases, conjunctions, different verb forms, and punctuation, how to use the full range of punctuation, the vocabulary. So they need to know the term synonyms, so words that have the same meaning, and antonyms, words that have the opposite meaning. And they need to be able to distinguish between standard English and formal English, and also know those full range of spelling. So these are things that we work on daily in class. Some examples of questions, and I am going to flick through these because I'm very aware of time. There will be examples of some of these test papers out for Parents' Evening and for Come and Share. They're also widely available on the internet if you want to sort of have a look at it and look at some of the examples of questions. But these are the types of questions where they're ticking boxes, show a pair of verbs that correctly completes the sentence below. Write the contracted form of the underlined words in the box, so they'd write that decision doesn't seem fair. So they need to know what contracted form means, and they need to make sure the apostrophe is in the correct place, because if they don't put it in between the N and the T, they won't get the mark right. Circle 2 words in the sentence below that are synonyms of each other, so lucky and fortunate in that context. And then this is an example of one of the really complex, this is one of the last questions on the paper, where they have to tick one box in each row to show whether the word after is used as a subordinating conjunction or as a preposition. So they need to know what those terms are in order to be able to answer that question and identify it. So a real range of question types, and there's ticking, there's single word answers, and there's sentence answers. The spelling test, as I said, is where we read 20 sentences and the child fills in the blank by correctly spelling the missing word. So these are some examples of one used in the past. We would say the dragon is an imaginary creature, and children would spell the word creature. There was enough food for everyone, and we would repeat this 3 or 4 times. Children could say, can you repeat spelling number 16? We'll say generous. Generous people give to charity. They have to sort of spell them out. They all follow the spelling rules from the Key Stage 2 and the Year 5 and 6 spelling lists. Okay.
All right, I'm going to start talking about maths now. I'll go quickly because I can see the timer at the top. But there are the 3 papers, like Mrs. Harrison talked about a minute ago. The resources provided are a mirror, a protractor, a ruler, a pencil, and an eraser, a rubber. I'm trying to discourage that this year because I think they've been talking. The papers get scanned in, and so when they rub them out with a rubber, it can mess with what they've written. So I'm trying to discourage that and do crossing out instead. But there are no calculators or tracing paper provided. This next slide shows a rundown. Like Mrs. Harrison was saying earlier, it's not just testing what they've learned in Year 6. This pie chart shows you exactly there's questions from a range of year groups. So the blue section is actually all questions based on year 3 knowledge, year 4, year 5. And so you can see the different marks they can get just from year 3 and year 4 and year 5 knowledge. And for this paper, the 2016 one, they needed 57 marks out of 110 across all 3 papers to get age related to have reached the working at the expected standard. So just around half of the marks. So that I just thought that's quite an interesting graphic there. Paper 1 is the arithmetic paper. It tests children on the fractions, decimals, percentages, rounding, and applying their addition, subtraction, and multiplication skills. The questions are presented like this one here. They don't have word problems surrounding them. It's just the straight arithmetic questions that they need to just prove that they know the methods. Some are worth 2 marks. So even if they, like for this long multiplication problem, if they've made a mistake, such as not including their placeholder in the second line, they may still pick up 1 mark for that question. But if they get it correct, they get the full 2 marks for that. There's another example here of long division. So some of them are worth 1 mark, some of them are worth 2 marks. The arithmetic paper is 30 minutes long, and how many questions are there? It's around 35 questions, I believe, because some are worth 2 marks. There's another one with fractions. And then I'll move on to the reasoning papers. So the papers 2 and 3, these are slightly longer, 40 minutes each, and there are 35 marks available for each of these. So the most marks on one paper is that arithmetic paper for 40 marks. So we do a lot of practice on arithmetic to make sure that they're feeling confident with each of those different methods. And they can be used to help them with these reasoning papers as well. So the children need to be able to apply their mathematical knowledge in order to solve problems such from geometry, ratios, charts and tables, units and measures, shapes, Roman numerals, and averages. I'll briefly show you some of these problems. So a lot more visual problems on the reasoning papers, and some of them are worth more than 1 mark as well. We've got shape problems. There we go. And so the children need to not just be doing their arithmetic skills, they would be needing to use the resources they have, like the rulers, to complete the problems. Some might involve completing charts, and like this one here, they have to do multi-step problems to find the answer. So they may take slightly longer, but there is a longer amount of time for this paper. There's one more on the graph.
Sorry, I was on mute. You'll have an opportunity to look at some of those papers in the Come and Share. We'll have lots of them out, and also Parents' Evening next week. So just to finish then, what happens to the tests and results? They are all sent away and they get packaged up, they get posted away, they are externally marked, and then we get the results sent to us in school in early July. So we then we take a few days where we process all the results, and the children and you will be informed. You'll get a sheet which will give you your children's score, and it could be part of your child's annual school report as well. So it comes out in early July. It tends to come out around the same time as the school reports. So the score, the score will be a scaled score between 80 and 120. Now 100 means if your child scores a score of 100, it means they've achieved the age-related expectations. So 100 is the score that the government would like all children to achieve. If they are over 110, it means that they have achieved great depth, so what we call a high score. But most children, if they've achieved that standard, will be at 100, and the highest that they can get is 120. And obviously the mark that they need to get in the paper, it changes every year. So we don't know until we receive those results back who has got age-related expectations and who's got that scaled score. But there's a booklet in the results that explains that a little bit more fully. So a child with a score below 100 is recorded as working towards the national standard. a child with a score of 100 or more will have achieved the national standard, expected standard, and a child with a score of 110 or more will be recorded as working at greater depth within the national standard. There's no greater depth in science. So even if your child has scored greater depth in all the other subjects, don't think that they've suddenly got really bad in science. It's just we cannot award greater depth in science. It's worth telling that. And the sheet that you have has the raw score, the scaled score, and whether they've reached the national standard for that subject. We've only got 1 minute left sort of on the meeting. So we've kind of done a whistle-stop tour of there. It is recorded and we will post up this recording on Class Dojo for you. If you have any questions, please do put them in the chat. I've still got access to the chat and I'll be copying them all and we will answer them all on Class Dojo as part of it. We'll also be sending out a letter about how we can, the things that we do and how we can help. But please, you've got Parents' Evening coming up, or come and share. Please come and speak to myself, Mr. Gobbert Brown, and we can talk you through those. And we'll be sending information out about things like the SATS Breakfast Club, which will be running for the whole of SATS week, where we will offer children a sort of a free breakfast and a chance to come in and just have a sort of a chill out time before the SATs. Thank you ever so much for taking the time to come and join us this evening. Again, apologies that it's been a whistle-stop tour. We are available to talk through